This is something we've all known was going to happen. Come on, you have a North Africa campaign in World War II, and you can't play as Rommel? Hello everyone, my name is Xabu, and well, Unity of Command 2 is getting another DLC, Desert Fox, playing as the Italians and that Africa core thing in North Africa in 1941-43. It's a giant new DLC with 25 missions in 3 branches, ranging from historical to slightly optimistic to wildly optimistic. From your usual garden variety desert tank raids, to alpine troops trudging through mountains in East Africa, to naval landings in the Mediterranean, to the absolute gargantuan Cthulesque creations that I don't dare talk about today. At the moment of this recording, I've completed 3/4 of the campaign, and I've had a great time so far. When I just got Desert Fox, I was a bit worried that because the DLC is immediately following the British version, Desert Rats, and because to a large extent it covers the same ground, there are a few missions that actually depict the German perspective of battles you've already seen in Desert Rats and in other campaigns. So there was a bit of a worry about more of the same missions, largely unfounded. The familiar locations, when they do show up, are exactly that, familiar and nice to meet again, but the gameplay is very different, and the way the Axis forces in this campaign are pushes you towards an approach that is somewhat different from what you would expect in Desert Rats. One example is the relatively high price of these specialist steps. No longer will you be able to give extra cheap armored cars to everyone, even though, don't get me wrong, recons are still really valuable. In the same vein, reinforcements are usually cheaper but less available. Plus, you have this whole thing with Italian troops, which are generally weaker than the German ones. The game will often push you towards looking for creative solutions for how to use the Italians, and indeed there are missions where Italians is the only thing you have. And this all obviously in addition to all of the detailed units and specialist steps created for the Italians, as well as some mechanical points of interest like the higher mobility of some of Italian infantry. We'll discuss more of this in the upcoming episodes, but today we'll look into the missions of the first 3 conferences of the DLC, including what appears to be its most difficult mission, Gazala. And by the way, if my brief guide here is not enough for you to crack it, I've posted a full playthrough of it with some comments on my second channel, Slothboomer a Couch Buttock. You'll find the link in the description. Another point is what skills to buy your HQs, and for this DLC, I am somewhat heretically against giving your HQs new skills, or too many of them anyway. For Afrika Core, the reason is that you want to have as few skills as possible so that when you level up, you can upgrade the most important things. The most important things easily being feint attack, rear guard, emergency supply, oversupply, in that specific order. The same is true with Italian HQs, except that Italian HQs are slightly less useful because they have slightly less useful troops. Although I do recommend giving level 3 operations to the 20th Corps. In addition to these level up considerations, generally Desert Fox is significantly more stingy with prestige compared to Desert Rats. And so it's a much better approach to focus on what you really need rather than what you might need somewhere in the future, or just buying all the stuff willy-nilly, which I've certainly been guilty of. In any case, it's time to get to the guide. Just let me remind you that, as always, I'm playing all of this on hard difficulty. I never buy any cards, and whenever I use cards during my playthroughs, I generally make a note of this in the guide, especially if it's something big like flying artillery. Right, enough rambling, let's do the doodles. So everything starts at Sonnenblume, and boy is this a rapid and breathtaking start. And rapid and breathtaking means that you shouldn't stop for anything. So squeeze the motorized regiment and especially the tank through the pathetic British defenses and don't look back. Use the Italian infantry to blockade Merselbrega. After a couple of turns, these guys will get weak enough for your Italian troops to destroy them. The reinforcements will also help. Back to your German troops. Here we'll see a bit of a division of labor. The motorized regiment will go to Suez. The defenders there are pretty pathetic, and once they're dealt with, just pivot towards Benghazi. The tank, on the other hand, will rush towards Tengeza, south of Suez. As you can see, Tengeza is and will be empty, and once it's yours, just pivot north and cut off Mechili. Mechili is probably the best place for you to use your flying artillery in. Benghazi is the other one, but there you'll have plenty of troops, unlike Mechili. Obviously, your airdrop supply is also intended for the tank, but the British AI will probably set up very convenient supply hubs around Tamini and Derna, so you shouldn't worry about the tank running red. And obviously, once Mechili is done, you will just go to Gazala, it's not going to be an issue. As for Benghazi and Babić, rush your motorized regiment there. Your Italian reinforcements should come early enough to participate in the combat in Benghazi, so channel them into weakening the defenders of the town. With 3 units at your disposal, the defenders, which as you can see are pretty weak, will just crumble and you will take the town and then rush your motorized regiment towards Babić, which will remain open. After such an exhilarating success at Sonnenblume, we need a little bit of sobriety, and assault on Tobruk will sure deliver us some. You can expect some frustration with this mission, and you should expect to take some losses. First and foremost, these perimeter objectives must be kept occupied at all times. The AI will not hesitate to retake them, which is unfortunate because you'll probably have to use one of your precious tank regiments to hold the eastern perimeter objective, so if there is any chance for you to swap units there, use it. I have also seen the AI pushing against very weak defenders at western perimeter, so watch out. Another good idea is giving one of your Italian motorized divisions double artillery specialists. They will be under Afrika Korps in this one, meaning that you'll comfortably use suppressive fire on enemy fortifications, making an artillery unit like that indispensable in breaching enemy defenses. And obviously El Adam Road and Ras El Medawa should be your immediate objectives, so rush to take them. Use rear guard if you still have command points left, because the AI will counterattack, in particular in the Ras El Medawa hex. It really loves that hex for some reason, and you don't need to hold it, so just take it and then leave it. El Adam Road, on the other hand, is the road for you to breach towards Tobruk, so push all of the available forces into that little channel north of El Adam Road. Try to destroy fortifications in the hex southwest of Tobruk. Holding that hex will already cut off supply from some of the enemies, preventing some possible counterattacks. And Tobruk Aerodrome is actually a place where I personally used a flying artillery, just to speed things up and cut the supply of the eastern defenders. Any enemy counterattacks into these hexes will just result in infantry just sitting in the middle of plains without any fortifications or entrenchment, and retaking those hexes is not going to be a big issue. And once you comfortably hold them, you can push into the city proper. This is where I use my flying artillery card that I got from Sonnenblume. It does give a nice boost in this rather frustrating and difficult scenario, and you won't have trouble replenishing your flying artillery card reserve very soon. So if you see your advance stalling here, feel free to use it. And once Tobruk is yours, you can aim your sights at Derna Road, which is gonna be guarded by extremely undersupplied troops that won't offer any resistance. The huge map of Cairo makes this scenario a bit more daunting than it really is. In fact, I think this is the easiest scenario in early DLC, and you shouldn't find it too difficult to deal with it. There might be some supply problems at first. Use that airfield near City Barani and obviously juggle your supply hubs, but once Mersa Matra is yours, that railway will solve all your problems. The mobile troops that the British have at City Barani will launch a bit of a counterattack, but they are pretty weak, and even decently equipped Italian troops will be able to stop them, but do not waste your best troops trying to mop them up. Obviously, kill those that really stand in your way. As for the rest, just block their supply and push your tanks as quickly as possible, as far as possible, because the distance you need to cover is huge. On turn 7, around the time you reach Alexandria, the British will get a bunch of reinforcements around Alexandria and around Cairo. Thankfully, though, they're all infantry, and in these open areas of Western Egypt, they're just going to become food for your tanks. Alexandria is easily the best place to spend your flying artillery here because the town is a little bit difficult to approach, which is not something you can say about Cairo, which is easily takeable by 3 or 4 motorized units with feint attacks. It shouldn't pose too much of an obstacle. Just make sure that once you take Alexandria, you clear the railway between Alexandria and Cairo so that you can comfortably keep Cairo within the reach of your HQs and consequently feint attacks. With its wonky-looking naval landing plot, Cicero seems to be a somewhat difficult mission, even though it is only Nicosia objective that can cause you trouble, and here's how to deal with it. Obviously, you should storm the shores with your naval infantry in all of the obvious locations. However, your paratroopers should drop to near where the enemy supply hub is. You cannot drop onto the supply hub itself, but as you may have guessed, on turn 2, you will take that supply hub, you will block the railway line, and Nicosia will remain without supply in just a couple of turns, and once you get reinforcements around the airfield, just mop up the city's defenders and push towards Famagusta. Resupplying those paratroopers may get tricky at one point, and you'll probably have to move them westwards into the catchment of your HQ, which you should set up in one of the hexes around the airfield. In any case, with this supply blocking approach, neither Nicosia nor Famagusta should pose a significant problem. You'll have plenty of time to deal with these towns. As for Paphos, it's critical that you take it as soon as possible, mainly because of the fact that taking this objective unlocks your HQ and allows you to set up supply hubs. So a good idea is to send most of your reinforcements that you get on turn 2. Actually, that dirt road to the north of the mountains is a really nice way to approach the town and not worry about any river crossing taking it. Finally, Limassol is going to be relatively well defended and will almost inevitably cause you some losses, which you shouldn't worry about. Most of these units you're not going to see ever again. Just don't forget that this objective is a supply port for the enemy, so make sure that any suppression you cause to the defenders turns into kills. Desert Rats, Desert Fox, whatever, both have an enforcer in them. This time we get to play as the Germans and Vichy French, and this is very much a one-trick mission. And the trick is to let the enemy rush through Daroa towards Damascus. Just rearguard those defenders in Daroa, you will be able to retake it by turn 6. It's not a big deal. The big deal is to prevent the enemy from covering its flanks and sneaking your cavalry through the hills south of Daroa, taking Irbid and all of the supplies for that enemy offensive. All that is left to do there is to block the bridges with your cavalry and wait for that enemy push, including all of the tanks, to just starve and die out. Use all of the German troops you get during the mission to destroy all of these encircled enemies. If you see that the enemy is trying to cover its eastern flank and maybe attack your cavalry that is hiding and waiting for a push, you may need to make the route towards Damascus a little bit more inviting and less defended. Certainly don't plop any German units immediately in that area. As for the western part of the map, obviously hold on to the objectives you're required to hold on, but be very conservative about the defending troops between Time and Jaun, and certainly don't shy away from using rear guard or just plainly retreating with those troops, because as it usually is, the objective limiting your losses is the hardest one, so make sure that you don't lose anyone beyond what is necessary. So, this is the first time we're meeting Suez in this DLC, and I'm happy to say it's this classic blitzkrieg scenario where the enemy is poorly positioned, where you get to do this breakthrough encirclements and taking huge swaths of land. This time in Egypt and Palestine. But first and foremost, here's a note on Suez. The objective. Don't waste too much effort on it, make sure you meet the deadline, but don't choose any flying artillery here. Clear the infantry surrounding it and then bombard it with feint attacks until it succumbs. Make sure to leave a decent unit protecting it like a good German motorized division. We're not crossing the canal here, and the British might counterattack if they see that there is a weak unit in Suez. Where we are going to cross the canal and do our breakthrough is that railway juncture between Ismailia and Port Said. Once again, don't waste your flying artilleries on that unit, just pepper it with feint attacks, or just normal attacks. It's pretty exposed and should not be too difficult to kick it out. Push forward, take that supply hub, and you will see that virtually all of the British troops around Ismailia and Port Said are now without supply. To make this breakthrough stick, use your paratroopers to block the railway. The scenario designer very conveniently marked the spots with a cliff, and with the paratroopers there, defending and then expanding your bridgehead is going to be child's play. Once you reach El Arish, pivot southeast and advance along the dirt road, which is where the British will counterattack. As you can see, they have a couple of decent mobile divisions near Aqaba, and fire brigade work is exactly what they're there for. Dealing them should not be too difficult of a task, but they will slow you down somewhat, so once you see an opening, rush one of your motorized divisions towards Aqaba. I recommend keeping one of your flying artilleries for that particular objective, because the unit inside the town will end up fortified by the time you reach it, becoming a somewhat annoying objective. The defenders of Sharm el-Sheikh, on the other hand, are pretty weak, and a well-supplied and oversupplied tank division will make quick work of them. Final note about this part of the map. Once you deal with a British counterattack south of El Arish, don't push anywhere to the west. The British are very likely to improve their supply situation there later in the mission. They will also maintain a defensive posture, and the terrain there is pretty difficult. Definitely not worth it. Now on to Palestine. The trick here is to break through as far as you can on turn 1. Use your second flying artillery to bombard that infantry between Irbid and Deroa, and squeeze all of your mobile troops into the breach as far as you can up to Nazareth, making sure you're encircling all of these other troops in the east of this part of the map. The British will most likely just retreat, so push your advantage and block the railway between Tel Aviv and Haifa as soon as possible, so that the enemy that sits north of it just stews with that supply, but also to prevent any reinforcements going to Tel Aviv. If you are fast enough, there actually is a chance of you taking Tel Aviv empty. In any case, just make sure to send all of your mobile troops towards the coast. If necessary, accept some losses taking Tel Aviv, and then move all of them along the railway towards El Arish to help out with the main advances in the Sinai. Alright, so here's our first defensive scenario, and Return of Tobruk is all about preserving your forces. This means no significant counterattacks, don't plan any crazy encirclements. Yes, they are possible. And yes, you will lose a crapload of German troops, which will be extremely valuable in a later mission. Also, be extremely generous assigning rearguard tokens, first and foremost to the units in the more exposed positions, like the hexes around City Rezek, and that hex south of Bir el-Gubi. The AI loves kicking you out of these areas, and rearguard means slowing it down while not losing your troops. And since I've already mentioned it, City Rezek is where it's at, and for the first 3 full turns of the mission, you will have to clear all of the hexes around the town, and obviously someone stronger with anti-tank steps inside the town itself. Critically, this includes that infantry northwest of City Rezek. The AI will not hesitate to use it, so on turn 1, clear that hex occupiers, and you can easily clear and take one of the 2 hexes occupied by the New Zealand infantry. So this is your general idea for dealing with City Rezek. Retreat, clear hexes around it, occupy them, give rearguard where it's important, wait for the rearguard to work, rinse and repeat. Bir el-Gubi generally is less of a priority for the enemy, but I've noticed that the AI tries to control at least 3 hexes around that objective before it launches an attack on the objective, provided obviously that its defenders are good enough, so keep that in mind. In any case, once turn 4 starts, move everyone at top speed westwards. Just run away, don't stop for any additional destruction of enemy. You may leave a couple of Italian screens on the roads west of El Adam and Bir el-Gubi, but even that is unnecessary. The AI is not going to have enough time to comfortably reach Alem Hamza and Gazala, so just run away. As for the guys left in Bardi and Solemn, just occupy Solemn with one of the stronger units you've got in the east. The AI is very unlikely to attack there, and use the remaining 2 infantry units essentially as bait to slow down any westward enemy advance. Theseus sends us on another rapid trip through Libyan deserts, and given the low number of enemy troops, speed and maneuver is essential here right from the start. The 2 enemy motorized divisions here, as you can see, have a rearguard token, which you can counteract by surrounding these 2 units and forcing them to retreat into nothing, meaning that they get cornered, suppressed, and easily destroyed. Even if you manage to kill at least one of the motorized divisions that way on turn 1, it's going to be a huge boost taking Antilat and Saumo on time. Also, once you breach through the zones of control of the enemy motorized divisions, you will find it very easy to use your one-step motorized unit in Mersel Brega to take Agidalbia on turn 1. The AI will almost certainly counterattack retake Agidalbia using that tank division from Antilat, but it's not difficult to destroy, and this will leave Antilat and Saumo open. Once you're done with these 3 initial objectives, Msu's, by the way, is probably going to be empty as well, so take it. Your main objective, though, should be Benghazi. Send good troops there first, and this is the prime location for the use of your flying artillery here, because in addition to being an objective, it's the only good way for you to set up a convenient supply hub. And obviously, don't forget to remove those trucks from Mersel Brega so that you can set up a better supply hub near Benghazi, which, once it's yours, push all of your tanks eastwards towards Machili. The AI will probably try to set up some sort of a defense. If it's difficult, just bypass them, move to Machili, block their supply lines. Once they get weaker, destroy them. It's also a good idea to send one of your motorized units along the railway, just in case you get bogged down at Machili and need to take Tamimi on time. This is also a way to set up even more convenient supply hubs in the east, and take any enemy supply hubs that the AI tends to set up around Tamimi as well. And here we are, the big nasty Gazala is easily the hardest mission in the first 3 conferences of the DLC. This is the main reason why you should seek to conserve as many of your troops in the previous historic missions, because just like Crusade and Desert Rats, a weak army will lead to absolute failure and an inability to complete the mission properly. And speaking of preparation, as you can see, the map is full of fortifications, which means that you need as much artillery and as much ability to use that artillery as you can. Invest in fire suppression for the 20th Italian Corps and get all of the self-propelled artillery for your German troops as you can get. Also, you'll get 3 cards on this map, meaning that you'll probably use up all of the cards you have previously, and trust me, a second flying artillery use will be very handy here. So at the beginning of the mission, you have 2.5 immediate objectives. One is breaking through to Sidi Mufta, and here I recommend just taking a hex next to it, not rushing the objective itself on turn 1 because of that counter-attack token on the tank. There's really no good reason to do it before turn 2. Your second task is where you should send your best troops to, is just launching into the plain east of Bir Hachaim and destroying as much of the enemy motorized troops as possible. They have 5 tank divisions and 3 motorized infantry divisions. They are strong on the offensive, and the AI will not hesitate to launch any counterattacks it can. So the destruction of all of the armored and motorized troops that the enemy has is pretty much a requirement for success in this mission. So lure enemy mobile forces into this tug-of-war in the eastern parts of the map and deal as much damage as you can while sustaining as little damage yourself. Here it's very important to remind you to be very liberal issuing rearguard tokens. Your motorized units are particularly vulnerable to enemy attacks, so just give rearguards retreat. As always, it's a very effective tool in these kinds of meeting kind of like engagements. And I've said 2.5 tasks. The half part is the stuff you do around Gazala. You're not going to be able to do much at first, but set at least 1 unit up to do set-piece attacks on one of the hexes next to Gazala, and actually keep launching these set-piece attacks, so by the time you really need to take that objective, you actually hold one of the hexes around it. And once you are done with Sidi Mufta, which is not too difficult, your approach with Bir Hachaim and Knightsbridge should be to bring artillery, use suppressive fire, because these bombardment strikes destroy fortifications, and the fortifications are the main reason preventing you from easily taking Tobruk and all of the rest of the stuff. So a couple of fire suppressions, fort destroyed, smother the enemy with feint attacks, and then just destroy them easily with your tanks. It is easily possible to take Bir Hachaim and Knightsbridge like 2 turns before the deadline, and if you do, you're on good track. Another area of interest is the 2 hexes north of Knightsbridge. Obviously, blocking them will cut off supplies going to Gazala, which is great, but there's also the fact that the AI hugely values the hex north of Knightsbridge, and if it sees that it can, it will do everything to retake it. This means that you should be careful about that area, but this means that you can also exploit it using rearguard tokens. The AI will not shy away from moving all these fortified troops into that hex, so this might be your opening for easier kills. As for the rest of the mission, I usually get to Tobruk through the hex southeast of it. The defenders there are the weakest and will fall apart after a couple of artillery barrages and air support, and Tobruk itself will easily fall with some flying artillery. Just make sure to occupy it with a stronger unit, because you're very unlikely to destroy all of the enemies around Tobruk, and the AI will try to retake it against a weaker defender. By turn 8, Gazala should be falling apart for the lack of supplies, so you shouldn't have too much trouble forcing a retreat with a set-piece attack and rushing some more infantry into the town. I found El Adam a little tricky because it always ends up pretty well fortified, so try to feint attack it into oblivion. Remember, it's a town hex and it can get destroyed mission-ending. Do whatever you can to take El Adam, just make sure that you touch a hex next to Railhead by the beginning of turn 8. It's also a good idea to bunch up your better troops around El Adam by turn 8 so that once Railhead is gone, you can rush quickly to Road to Egypt. It will always be garrisoned, and you will need more than just one unit to launch a few desperate attacks to clear it and actually occupy the hex. If you somehow manage to do a tricky maneuver through the desert and block the road between Railhead and Road to Egypt, good for you. I've generally found that the AI is pretty resistant to these cunning plans, but if you do succeed destroying enemy mobile forces, go for it. And this is it for now. If you're interested in my coverage of this entire campaign, stay around for the next episode in which I'll cover all of the missions of the huge Conference 4. At this point, I've completed all of them, and some of them are really interesting. See you later. Cheers.